Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. If you watch us on a regular basis, you know I've been very critical, and rightly so, of weak, woke Western leaders who have sold Israel down the river while at the same time importing millions of Muslim immigrants to their countries. In Canada, France, the UK, Sweden, and other NATO member nations, the governments seem very content to commit cultural suicide and to unhitch themselves from Judeo-Christian Western civilization. It's a civilization that was born in ancient Israel through the Ten Commandments and the teachings of Jesus. And in today's Middle East, Israel remains the lone outpost of what used to be Western values. So it really gives a sense of where we're at in some Western nations when their leaders readily embrace a false anti-Israel narrative. Just when you think they've already hit rock bottom, along comes Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese earlier this week. Now, we're going to show you that clip in a minute, but up first, folks, a quick reminder, if you have not subscribed, be sure to subscribe to the Watchman YouTube channel and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We are fast approaching 1.1 million subscribers. Hard to believe for such a time as this. Current events, breaking news, mainly from the Middle East and Israel, but we take it around the world as well, and all from an unapologetically biblical perspective. So number one, be sure to subscribe. Number two, our partner for today's newscast, our good friends at Magen David Adom. They are Israel's emergency services system, the EMTs, the medics, the first responders who are on the ground for quite literally every terror attack, every missile attack in the wake of October 7th. Magen David Adom is there. It's a largely volunteer force. Israel's emergency services system, imagine that, who respond to every emergency call, it's 90% volunteers. Folks, they're not getting paid for this. They're doing it because they're doing God's work. They're doing it for their fellow countrymen and women. Right now, they need a lot of assistance as Israel fights a war on 7 fronts. You can support Israel, fulfill that biblical mandate laid out in Genesis 12:3 by supporting Magen David Adom. It is SaveLivesIsrael.com. SaveLivesIsrael.com. I cannot think of a better way. If you can't get to Israel and be on the ground, I cannot think of a better way to stand with the world's one and only Jewish state right now. SaveLivesIsrael.com. Magen David Adom doing absolutely amazing work. They also distribute and supply not only the blood supply for every Israeli civilian, but for the IDF. Needless to say, they are on the front lines. There have been over 30 Magen David Adom volunteers killed in the line of duty since October 7th. 17 of their ambulances destroyed by terrorists. So again, SaveLivesIsrael.com. Help them to do God's work in Israel's time of greatest need. One man who is not doing God's work in Israel's time of greatest need, who's doing actually quite the opposite, is Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Talk about craven and weak and woke. Here was Albanese earlier this week talking about Israel and Gaza. Watch.
The violence has gone on since 2023, since October 7. And the Netanyahu government strategy is just to keep going, just to keep doing more of the same. And the world is saying we need a solution to this conflict. We need to end the cycle of violence. And the way to do that is to have a two-state solution with a demilitarized Palestinian state.
Another two-state solution zombie. Number one, the violence has gone on since October 7th, 2023, because Hamas invaded Israel, slaughtered 1,200 people, and still holds dozens of hostages, refusing to surrender to boot. Number two, you heard it once again, the Palestinian state delusion. The leaders of France, the UK, Canada, and now Australia, all calling for a Palestinian state which would only reward Hamas. As President Trump has pointed out, calls for that state encourage Hamas to dig in more and to increase its demands. It's also obvious, but we live in times when moral clarity is at a premium and common sense is not so common. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded to the Australian Prime Minister, and he did not mince words. Bibi wrote Albanese a personal letter calling him out and then posted the following on X. Quote, History will remember Albanese for what he is, a weak politician who betrayed Israel and abandoned Australia's Jews. Amen. And the response from Anthony Albanese, of course, was to double down. Take a look.
We'll continue to put forward Australia's position. And, you know, Australians want those two things. They want the cycle of violence to stop, and they don't want conflict brought here.
First of all, any so-called cycle of violence is perpetuated by Hamas and its masters in Iran. Secondly, if you don't want violence to come to Australia, again, maybe you shouldn't import waves of Muslim immigrants from the Middle East who have no desire to assimilate into your culture. Folks, I can't tell you how thankful I am to live in America right now at a time where moral clarity and common sense are back in the White House. The picture from Monday's meeting on Russia and Ukraine with world leaders sitting around President Trump's desk in the Oval Office like school children at the principal's office pretty much summed up where things are. The leader of the free world is back in business, and it's a good thing because it looks like Israel is preparing to finish the job in Gaza, and you just know that the world is going to howl. That's why voices like John Spencer's are so important. He's the world's foremost expert on urban warfare and chair of urban warfare studies at the Modern War Institute at West Point. He's also co-director of the Urban Warfare Project and a combat veteran with more than 2 decades in the U.S. Army. I interviewed John earlier today on what the IDF is preparing in Gaza and why the false narratives about Israel will eventually be shattered. Watch. John, always great to see you. Hey, I want to get into the nitty-gritty of Gaza and a potential invasion by the IDF of Gaza City. But first, John, we've been talking on this program about these calls for a Palestinian state by the leaders of the UK, Canada, Australia, France. John, in your view, you've been to Gaza, you've been on the ground, you've seen it all up close. Why is that so destructive? Does that just reward Hamas and embolden them to dig in further?
Absolutely. It's rewarding terrorism. It's rewarding even the Palestinian Authority with their pay-to-slave program. It is literally rewarding terrorism and upsetting all international norms, right? The Palestinian state, there's no border anybody can draw. There's no authority anybody can give. There's no representation. There's so many issues. And for it to be used as a threat against Israel, to be clear, that's what they did, is ridiculous. And you only have to listen to the Palestinian voice, like Hamas, who says, look, France, thank you for your recognizing of the Palestinian state, but just to be clear, we want our capital to be Jerusalem, and we don't want Israel to be a part of it. So it's unfortunate that this is the way that any nation would treat another nation, let alone Israel, and just create this double standard on trying to create a state where there isn't one that exists.
Yeah, it's a complete collapse of moral clarity. Speaking of which, speaking of Gaza, John, look, the IDF right now massing for a possible invasion of Gaza City and to finally conquer Gaza City and hopefully defeat Hamas decisively once and for all. What's the latest on that, John? What are you hearing? And what is the possibility for success for the IDF in this operation?
Sure. So what we know so far is that the plan has been approved. Israel has called up 60,000 reservists for what seems to be a 5-division attack into Gaza City. And to be clear, the IDF have not gone into these areas ever out of concern for the hostages, since Hamas still holds 20 living hostages that they're starving, torturing, doing awful things to, and 30 bodies of hot. But Israel has, up to this point, not gone into this very dense city where there's currently 1 million Palestinian civilians who moved back because Hamas made them after the last ceasefire. We believe this operation may go through, and all the plans are being set. The call-ups are happening. The IDF are preparing. They're still there. So the IDF currently have 4 divisions after Operation Gideon's Chariots, eliminating Hamas terrorists, eliminating more mile after mile after mile of the tunnels that Hamas invested in billions of dollars instead of investing in the people or the infrastructure. So, but at this point, Hamas, like it has in the past, whenever it is truly threatened, when there's truly no daylight between the United States, thanks to President Trump, and Israel's right to pursue the release of the hostages and the removal of Hamas from power, Now we're reaching a point where there is no daylight, although you have these, like you said, all these countries trying to designate a Palestinian state to reward Hamas. But Hamas has now come back on, okay, wait a minute, we're willing to do a temporary ceasefire, 60 days for a certain number of hostages. When Israel wants, and the United States and everybody wants this to be over. I mean, you have Arab nations now saying, of course, we agree that Hamas must give the hostages back, disarm, and not be in power in Gaza, but they have no solution. So the IDF are going to move forward, and it's going to be a tough fight, Eric. I want people to know. I mean, what the IDF have been able to do, there is very few explanations for it. Under this scenario of somebody preparing, every building is a bomb, every step you take, there's an enemy tunnel underneath you, that the IDF have lost, almost 1,000 soldiers, but to be able to do that, there's very few explanations outside of some history in Israel. Like, how did you do that? How did you enter this prepared ground like this? But the tough fight will be that deep center of Gaza City that they haven't gone into yet.
Yeah, and John, about 30 seconds left before the break. You believe most of the hostages perhaps are in that Gaza City area?
Most, but there's another area they're called the central camps in Deir Blah, and I wouldn't put it past Hamas to put them in the humanitarian zone, the Al-Mawasi humanitarian zone, where, oh, by the way, the mastermind of the military, Mohammed Def, was killed in that area. So I don't put it outside that realm, that they're there as well.
I want to ask you as well. You've been on the ground in Gaza. You follow this closely, very closely, of course. These claims that Israel is intentionally starving the people of Gaza. We could go on and on about this, of course, but what's your short take on this, and why is the world swallowing this narrative?
Well, why the world is swallowing a narrative is very complex, and the anti-Israel, anti-Semitism. To be honest, many of these groups within the United Nations have a record of this. But to answer the question, it's a flat-out lie. And I actually leave you with Proverbs 12:19 that I follow often. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts but a moment. And I think that's what you're seeing, is that they're not even trying in their lies anymore. Like the photographing of children with cerebral palsy and then saying this is the evidence of Israel intentionally starving. There is somebody intentionally starving Gazans in Gaza, and that's Hamas, right? Nobody tracks the number of food or even how Hamas sells the free aid back to the people and tries to attack the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is doing, and I know you've covered a lot of this, the Lord's work and feeding people directly and the thanks that the people give them. But every element of it is just a lie, not truthful to even the story. I quoted on a story today where they're talking about trucks going into Gaza being stopped for a certain reason, and the news agency never felt to ask whoever was saying that it was stopping, like the COGAT or any other organization. And one guest you had on said he doesn't know if there's anybody else. Well, I can say as an analyst, and I wrote this paper, there has never been a military in history who has fed the enemy's population during the battle, during the war, especially when they're holding hostages and making statements about being committed to doing more October 7th. Not World War I, II, Korea, no war, ever have we ever fed Israel, the enemy's population, in the midst of the battle. And they get no credit for that.
None. John, so well said all around. Hey, speaking of global hotspots, we've got the Middle East, of course, and Gaza, Russia, Ukraine. It continues, but big meeting on Monday, President Trump with world leaders at the White House. Prospects for peace there? Because of President Trump's peace through strength strategy, prospects for peace there possibly growing nearer? How do you see it?
Well, if anything, the president, like he has in many other cases, will exhaust all means to get to a peaceful resolution. The European leaders said it, that nobody else. The strategy of just giving Ukraine enough arms just not to lose wasn't going to work and was bleeding Ukrainians dry who are fighting for their freedom. And we can talk about the misinformation of not even like, how Russia takes tens of thousands of kids out of Ukraine and gives them up for Russian adoption. They'll never know they're Ukrainian. But the president has moved this closer towards. But in war, there's always uncertainty. And there is absolutely apprehension to Putin agreeing to any reasonable end of the conflict because of what he's actually said he is in Ukraine for. And it's changed a couple times, but to be clear on what it is for, I'm hopeful the parts about the security guarantees that Ukraine and the European leaders are sure that need to be in place no matter what happens, so that Russia, like it did in the invasion of Georgia, the taking of Crimea and other locations, just doesn't wait a couple of years and then keep on driving with its illegal, and we want to talk about international norms, illegal invasions of other territories, just trying to make might is right.
Yeah, John, well said again. Hey, about a minute left. President Trump's talked a lot about the cost of that war between Russia and Ukraine. John, do we have any idea of the tally of casualties on the Ukrainian and the Russian side in this war?
No, we actually don't. I mean, we have figures and estimates. Some intelligence agencies estimate, and I've seen, in places like Bakhmut, where the Russians they emptied their prisons of 40,000 murdering, raping prisoners and threw them into the fire as human waves, right, losing 10,000 a day. But the actual true number, of course, it's over 1 million. They think it's around 1 million Russians and 400 to 600,000 Ukrainians. The estimates are all over the place. It's a giant loss of life, but you have one side fighting for a just reason, survival.
Yeah. Great breakdown from our good friend John Spencer. Folks, be sure to follow him on X. He's really a must follow. I can't think of anyone out there who's doing a better job of debunking the lies, and he's got all the credibility in the world and the real world experience, the on the ground experience to back it up. Great having John with us. Hey, great having you with us. Until next time, God bless you, and remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.